Recent studies have shown that anything between 30 to 75% of children want to be YouTubers when they grow up. But back in the day, kids wanted to be things like astronauts, police officers, firefighters, and other much more noble jobs. But one kid didn't want any of that. He didn't want what he saw as a boring career. He wanted to be something much more interesting. He wanted to be a supervillain. Which sounds pretty ridiculous. At least, it did. Until he started plunging towns into darkness, hacking critical infrastructure, and bringing entire cities to a grinding halt. Joseph Konopka, better known as Dr. Chaos. But before we get into the mad lad, a big thank you to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video. I have all the time in the world for VPNs because they are very pro-internet freedom and very anti-censorship. VPNs are very handy for me because in my line of work, a lot of people send me articles to look at and I'm always worried that one of these links will be an IP grabber. So I flick my VPN on before I click these links to keep myself safe. Another thing that VPNs are very good for, which is pretty related to this video, is they can stop hackers from stealing your information. You can also use PIA to access the American Netflix. It also works with Hulu, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, and it also lets the Yanks access the BBC. Private Internet Access is a leading no-log VPN service with 10,000 servers in 70 countries and dedicated apps across platforms like Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, Amazon Fire Stick, and Linux that you can use to connect up to 10 devices. It is also PCMag's Editor's Choice VPN. There are multiple payment options like PayPal and Bitcoin, it has a kill switch button, and most importantly, there is absolutely no logging. So click my link down below to get 3 years plus 2 months free for just $79. That's just $2.08 a month. So go down below, you click the link. Habibi, please. Joseph Konopka was born on the 24th of June in 1976, and he lived in the small town of De Pere, Wisconsin. He mainly grew up on a small family farm just outside of the town, living with his grandparents as his parents were absent for most of his life. When he was growing up, he was said to have been very shy, making it very hard for him to make friends. He'd very rarely show any emotions with anyone except for his grandfather, who Konopka was extremely close to, as he frequently took him on long drives around Wisconsin, and he also let him drive the family tractor around. Despite his lack of social skills, Konopka took very well to his studies, particularly when it came to computing. In fact, he was said to be so skilled with computers that teachers and staff in his middle school would actually approach him for technical help. Later on, however, it was becoming clear that Konopka was getting completely fed up with life at school, either due to his unsociable nature or because he found that the lessons simply didn't challenge him enough. In either case, he decided to drop out before graduating high school and would spend the rest of his time playing video games, watching TV, and working on various projects on his computer. Knowing that he was extremely skilled with computers, Konopka's grandparents eventually convinced him to take up a systems administrator job in the Green Bay area of Wisconsin. He apparently really enjoyed his work and his former bosses even remarked that he never missed a single day of work, and he was a model employee. Now that is usually where the story would end. A socially awkward but talented kid who finally discovered what he enjoyed doing and built his future from there. A happily ever after. However, this is a Mad Lad video. If you've ever been around kids, you'll probably notice that they act up a lot when they get bored. Running about, screaming, just generally being a pain in the arse. But Joseph Konopka wasn't an ordinary kid. And Joseph Konopka found himself getting very bored very regularly. So instead of just getting a bit huffy or finding a hobby to preoccupy him, Konopka vented his frustrations by destroying post boxes and lampposts, deliberately crashing his car into private garages, and attempting to break into and steal people's cars. That's quite an extreme way to fight off boredom, but it seemed that Konopka wasn't just trying to fight off boredom. He was looking for excitement, a thrill, that adrenaline rush that some people can become addicted to. And Konopka would end up looking for things that gave him this thrill. So Konopka ended up also getting involved in illegal computer hacking. And he was even suspected to have been a member of the notorious hacker group 2600, who Konopka would meet up with in Chicago so that they could all exchange tips and also plan illegal activities. All of this culminated into the local police issuing a warrant for Konopka's arrest, and Konopka being arrested and sentenced to 10 months in jail for his acts of vandalism. For most young people, that would have probably been a massive reality check and scared them straight out of doing anything like that again. But again, Konopka wasn't like most young people. Far from scaring him, this experience actually made Konopka want to do even more dangerous things. After getting out of jail, Konopka eventually formed his own hacking group that he called the Realm of Chaos, and he recruited his mostly teenage members into the group through a forum that was called Teens for Satan. And it would be on this particular website that Konopka would go by the username Dr. Chaos. He would frequently invite his members over to his place of work, sometimes just to chill out and play video games, but he also mentored them into becoming elite computer hackers themselves. Dr. Chaos was apparently such an effective mentor that one of his own group was actually later arrested for successfully hacking into the computer system of the US Department of Defense. Dr. Chaos also got his members involved in his spontaneous acts of vandalism and hacking in the local area by getting them to join him in committing break-ins and causing damage to public property. Now, these acts weren't just carried out willy-nilly. They were carefully planned and coordinated. The Realm of Chaos wasn't just a bored group of teenagers. They conducted themselves like a domestic terrorist cell. One of Dr. Chaos's favourite pastimes would be to go up to electrical substations or pylons and simply flip the switches about. This would cause the pylons themselves to create a bit of a light show in the dark sky, and it would also cause the entire town's lights to flicker on and off. This power surge that he caused would continue for quite a while after he flicked the switches around. So Dr. Chaos would then camp out on the nearby hills to watch the light show he had created and also watch all of the panic going on in the town.
So he's just driving along and sees this, targets it for some reason, huh?
That's all I can imagine. I can't imagine any other reason why.
Pete Hack with Algoma Utilities remembers the first time Konopka and his gang attacked an electrical substation in this town on the shores of Lake Michigan.
This is incredibly dangerous.
I wouldn't try it myself, I guarantee you that. Why you would monkey with a switch of 69,000 volts, but he did.
So just to sort of put this into perspective, Dr. Chaos was deliberately meddling around with pylons. So if he screwed up, he would have got 69,000 volts right through his body and been turned into an extra crispy family bucket. This either speaks to how vastly intelligent he was that he was able to do this without killing himself, or how incredibly bored he was that he was willing to risk his own life just so he could be briefly entertained by a random act of vandalism. Another of Dr. Chaos's favourite activities would be to mess with radio broadcasts. Typically, he would just tamper with the physical components of radio towers, or he would just set the radio tower on fire. You know, the direct approach. But one time, he actually managed to remotely hack into a local radio station, and he could force the radio station to play any recording that he chose. Now, we don't have any recordings of what Dr. Chaos played, but it was apparently so bad that the radio station went into shutdown, and the only thing you could hear on the channel was the emergency broadcast signal. We don't have as many details about his other acts of vandalism, but according to various court documents and media reports, Dr. Chaos clearly never had a sense of when he took things too far. Amongst the things that we just went over, Dr. Chaos and his group, the Realm of Chaos, also committed multiple arsons. They trafficked counterfeit goods, they spied on people through their emails and calls, and they also disabled ground-based navigation systems for planes coming in to nearby airports. This guy basically went from being Dennis the Menace to Heath Ledger's Joker over the course of a single year. So why did Dr. Chaos and his realm commit these acts of vandalism? Were they anarchists who wanted to send a message, or were they all pure nihilists that just wanted to watch the world burn? They did it because they thought it was cool. No deeper meaning, no noble cause. They just thought that seeing people crashing in aeroplanes and nearly microwaving themselves would be a bit of a laugh. However, it seems that not even the Realm of Chaos itself was safe from Dr. Chaos, as Dr. Chaos allegedly intimidated his younger members to get them to go along with his more crazy schemes. There was even one witness in court who testified that Dr. Chaos just casually used a stun gun on him before they all went out to disrupt another electrical substation. No reason for, tagging him with a stun gun. He just felt like it. This whole escapade lasted from 1997 to 2001, with Dr. Chaos causing around $800,000 worth of damage across 13 counties in Wisconsin. By 2001, the authorities had finally tracked him down again and issued a court summons, which would have seen Dr. Chaos facing up to 30 years in prison. Despite his family begging him not to risk losing a $15,000 bail deal, Dr. Chaos decided he didn't want to do any more jail time, and he fled his home in 2001, taking $13,000 in cash from his accounts. He ended up making his way to Chicago, where he would spend his days squatting in various abandoned metro buildings. He did this because the metro tunnels allowed him to move around the city undetected, and he would be able to store his belongings without fear of them getting stolen. In fact, he was so comfortable in his underground lair that he actually refitted the locks to one of the metro doors so that only he could open it. He would also steal or make keys to other buildings in the Chicago city area to assist himself in burglaries and further bouts of mischief. However, Dr. Chaos's most valuable and dangerous acquisition came when he was partaking in some urban exploration in the outer city limits. When he was walking around an abandoned warehouse, he found just lying there, just randomly lying there, in the warehouse, 7 crates of sodium and potassium cyanide.
Sometime during summer of 2001, he had visited an abandoned warehouse with an associate and had located a number of vials of different chemicals, things like mercuric sulfate, potassium chlorate, also 2 types of cyanide. So we had sodium cyanide and potassium cyanide.
Cyanide is actually quite commonly used in industrial procedures like metal treatment, which would explain why there would have been a bunch of boxes lying around in an abandoned industrial district. However, in Illinois, it is a criminal offence to possess cyanide without having a lawful reason for doing so. Despite this, and for reasons that are still unknown to this day, Dr. Chaos began the process of transporting and storing these crates to his makeshift lair within the Chicago subway system. Around this time, Dr. Chaos was also using the nearby tunnel systems of the University of Chicago to conduct various break-ins and burglaries. The on-campus police were becoming quickly aware of these nightly raids, so they decided to launch a full-scale stakeout of the tunnel system on the evening of the 9th of March 2002. Fortunately for them, they encountered and managed to successfully apprehend Dr. Chaos, alongside a 15-year-old accomplice he was with at the time. When they conducted a brief body search, the campus police managed to obtain various access keys, digital cameras with photos and schematics of buildings, tools for breaking in, and most ominously, a small vial of cyanide. The campus police immediately contacted the FBI, who conducted a thorough interview with the 2 trespassers. After both of the trespassers admitted to storing cyanide within the metro system, the police immediately ordered that the blue line of the Chicago subway was to be shut down and that the area was to be completely swept for traps and other chemical weapons. The authorities in Chicago also had to play down the scale of the threat to the public in order to prevent a mass panic from happening. Because bear in mind, this incident happened only half a year after 9/11, so it was very important for police to keep everyone calm so that they would let the police conduct their investigation without any extra pressure or interference. The mayor of Chicago even called for a general inquiry as to the potential application of unused metro property in terrorist attacks in order to prevent events such as this from ever happening again. Whilst this was all going on, the FBI were furiously trying to determine Dr. Chaos's motive for storing several large crates of cyanide in his underground lair. And they were also trying to figure out why he was carrying a small vial of cyanide on him when he got caught. The FBI attempted to learn more information about this by raiding a 2600 meetup that was happening in Chicago at the time, but this raid didn't provide any helpful answers. Dr. Chaos would still maintain in court and in media interviews that he didn't really have any reason for carrying the cyanide around, but a few people have come up with their own theories. Members of his own family actually thought that the reason that he had a small vial of cyanide on him was so that he could take his own life if he was ever discovered again by the police. Because bear in mind, he was a 25-year-old guy at this point, and for all he knew, he was facing a 30-year prison sentence, which would have given him very little reason to continue living. As for the rest of the giant crates of cyanide, toxicologists present at the university suggested that Dr. Chaos was planning to unleash a massive gas plume of cyanide within the metro tunnel network, which would have caused a lot of disruption and also killed a hell of a lot of people. Given that Dr. Chaos was really escalating the scale and damage of his stunts, I don't think we can completely discount that as being a possible motive. His family members would argue that he wouldn't have wanted to hurt anyone, but given that he had reached the point of potentially killing people in airplanes, maybe it's not that much of a reach. But Dr. Chaos still maintains to this day that he had no intention whatsoever of committing any kind of chemical attack with the cyanide.
No ill intent. I didn't have any plan to do any terrible thing with the cyanide. It was one of those kind of spur-of-the-moment things that you sometimes get to do when you're young.
To be completely fair, if I was still a kid and I was just wandering through a warehouse and I just randomly stumbled across several giant crates of cyanide, I too would probably go, "Oh, cool," and take them home. I was a really stupid kid. To give you an example of what a stupid child I was, back in my younger days, I used to do, shall we call it, street art. And there was a wall that I wanted to put some of my art on. The only problem was, the only way that you could actually reach this bit of wall was to climb up onto the roof next to it and then hang over a 4-story drop so that you could, put your art on the wall. So I thought that the genius thing to do was to get a friend of mine to hold on to my belt while I leaned at a 45-degree angle over a 4-story drop so that I could tag this wall. That was probably one of the dumbest things that I have ever done in my entire life. I am older and wiser now and can very happily tell you, do not do anything like that. Do not do that. I'm lucky to be alive. I am lucky that that instance of gross stupidity did not kill me, right? If I could travel back in time to meet my 16-year-old self again, I would boot myself up and down the street for being such a dafty. But to get back onto Dr. Chaos, regardless of Dr. Chaos telling the FBI investigators over and over again that he had no intention whatsoever of committing any kind of terrorist attack, he was still sentenced to 21 years in prison, both for the cyanide charges and also for skipping out on his previous sentences. A judge in 2005 actually attempted to extend his sentence even further, but this was overturned due to the judge basically wanting to add the charge of use of fire to an arson case. I mean, none of us here are lawyers, but even we know that that's pretty stupid. Even in jail, Dr. Chaos apparently continued his old tricks by crafting escape tools out of basic electronic devices with the intent to disrupt surveillance equipment and alarmed fence systems. He would admit to taking these devices apart and reconfiguring them for fun, but there wasn't enough evidence to suggest that he ever attempted a jailbreak with them. Dr. Chaos was eventually released on probation in November of 2019, and he continues to live somewhere in Chicago to this day. He's even done an interview with the local news station WGN, which is where a lot of the footage from his life was made available. It was because of this interview, however, that the court tried to file a motion prohibiting him from talking to the media during his probation, but this never really came to anything. Konopka is currently seeking employment as an ethical hacker, where he can hopefully put his watchdog skills to good use. People to this day still try and attribute an anarchist or anti-government angle to Dr. Chaos's activities, but Dr. Chaos himself has said that he does not hold such views, and he's actually never held such views.
Were you trying to make a point?
No, nothing so sophisticated. It was more, I'm bored on a Saturday and I know how to do this, so let's go do this. Yeah, there was no anti-government, anti-society thing behind it. I guess it looks nice on the message boards and whatnot, but yeah, there wasn't really a huge underlying plan.
So after all of this, has Joseph Konopka finally learned his lesson, and is he doing everything he can to make sure that he stays out of prison?
You don't have any intention of breaking the law again, do you?
No, I've been steering clear of that. I've been enjoying the CTA from above rather than from below. Just basically working and staying out of trouble.
All of this sounds like something out of a cheesy comic book, doesn't it? A supervillain called Dr. Chaos who blacked out entire cities, hijacked radio broadcasts, tried to crash planes and all that stuff, and then he gathers up tons of cyanide that he stashes in his underground lair. It is the storyline of a cheesy comic book, except it actually happened in real life. Just a personal opinion, do I actually think that he was going to commit some big, massive terrorist chemical attack from his lair in the Chicago metro system? No, I don't. Purely based on the fact that he had this cyanide for a long time. He had it for quite a while, and during that time, he could have carried out such an attack, but he never did. So I genuinely believe it was just a case of he saw those crates, thought, oh, that's cool, and he just took them. You know, some people might disagree, but I don't think he was actually going to commit a terrorist attack. So it does seem that Dr. Chaos is now completely reformed, and now that he has grown up, he looks back and regrets his past actions, and he doesn't have any intention of becoming Dr. Chaos again. He seems to just want to travel the world and put his skills into being an ethical hacker, and now that he is fully reformed, I do wish him the best of luck with that, and I hope he has a happy life on the straight and narrow, using his powers as a force for good. But still, it must have been pretty cool being a supervillain for a while.
I've never really been much of a believer in anarchy myself. Nature abhors a vacuum, and that includes a power vacuum.
You created a lot of it, though, in your day, Joe.
Well, I wouldn't say I created anarchy. I just created mayhem.
Chaos.
Chaos.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube. Everybody should subscribe.